This is Deborah Atkinson, and you're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top questions and struggles. I share what to eat, how to move, and how to think to get the energy and the vitality you want in this second and better half. And back with me today is one of my favorite doctors. Known as America's holistic beauty doc, Anthony Youn is a nationally recognized board-certified plastic surgeon. Recognized as a leader in his field, he's the author of the best-selling books, The F.A.C.S, A Leading Plastic Surgeon Reveals How to Look 10 Years Younger, and In Stitches, a memoir. His public television special, The F.A.C.S with Dr. Anthony Youn, has been viewed by millions. Dr. Youn also hosts the popular podcast, The Holistic Plastic Surgery Show. His new book, Playing God, is the evolution of a modern surgeon, details his humorous, heartwarming, and often harrowing journey to become a leading plastic surgeon. He's an assistant professor of surgery at Oakland University, William Beaumont School of Medicine, and I am so glad you're here. Thanks for being here and taking a little time away.
Thank you so much for having me, Deborah. This will be real fun.
Well, let's tell all of our listeners and assume that maybe we've got some new followers since the last time you were here. Describe holistic plastic surgery. Those are not necessarily two words seen in the same sentence often.
No, it doesn't. And traditionally, plastic surgery has been all about operating and surgery. And if you watch the different TV shows about plastic surgery, a lot of it seems to be about the money and the glitz and the glamour and these puffy lips and big breasts. And that's not what I consider real plastic surgery and holistic plastic surgery, because holistic plastic surgery and really the better way to do it is to look at a patient as a whole person. And there is so much more that we can do to help ourselves look and feel our best than people typically realize. And it goes from a lot of stuff that you are advocating for your followers, like eating the right diet, using clean skincare, de-stressing, getting the right exercise. And there are a plethora of non-invasive and minimally invasive options. So really, actual plastic surgery, actual surgery should always be used as a last resort.
And that's a pretty refreshing stance, I would say, coming from a plastic surgeon. I know it's certainly not the answer that someone might expect, given we've all got stereotypical ideals. So while we've got you here, pinned against the wall, you cannot leave, the doors are locked. Let's talk. Because this time in our lives for me and for my listeners is such a roller coaster. I mean, honestly, it's not unlike being a teenager all over again. There's breakouts and there's wrinkles, all at the same time. There's aging, and it's like, how do we keep up? So any ideas? What's a simple skincare routine that works?
Yeah, so that's a thing that can be very confusing because there's so much marketing out there with skincare brands, and this is better than Botox, and that's better than Retin-A, and what do you use on your skin? So what I try to do is try to really disseminate it down into this simple, basic things that we know 100% work. So every morning, you want to cleanse your skin, get a good cleanser for your skin that's appropriate for your skin type. Ideally, when you cleanse your skin, it doesn't necessarily need to feel squeaky clean afterwards, because sometimes when it feels so squeaky clean, it means that the cleanser is over aggressive and has removed all the oils from your skin. So use a cleanser that is comfortable for your skin. If you've got oily skin, then a foaming cleanser is usually pretty good. If you've got more drier or sensitive skin, then a more gentle, milky type of cleanser can work well. After cleansing in the morning, ideally you want to apply an antioxidant serum. Vitamin C is what's most commonly used, and most skincare brands have a vitamin C serum. Ideally, if you want to take that next step, then combining vitamin C and vitamin E is a great option. We have, in my skincare brand, Youn Beauty, we've got a vitamin C E antioxidant serum where studies show if you combine those two antioxidants together, you can get a synergistic effect. So the second step then is you apply an antioxidant like vitamin C or vitamin E. And then you want to apply a good sunscreen or sunblock to your face, at least an SPF 30. Technically, that's all you have to do in the morning. Those are the basics. At night, definitely have to cleanse your skin. Okay. You want to get rid of the day's worth of oil and grime and dirt and pollution that collects on the surface of your face. You want to get rid of that makeup so it doesn't clog your pores. After cleansing your skin, then you want to apply a good anti-aging cream. And the one that I usually recommend as a starting point is a retinol. Retinol is a form of vitamin A. Of all the different types of anti-aging creams out there, whether it's copper or niacin or alpha hydroxy acids, any of these things, retinol and Retin-A have been the most studied and the most proven anti-aging creams. And most skincare companies have a relatively inexpensive retinol cream. You apply that at night. It will exfoliate your skin. It will help with fine lines and overall the texture of your skin. And really, if that's all you do, you're way ahead of everybody. So in the morning, you cleanse, antioxidant, sunscreen. At night, you cleanse, you apply a retinol moisturizer. That's all you technically have to do. And you really are doing great for your skin.
Awesome. Okay. Great tips. We're in the heat of summer. Or, okay, everybody else is not in the heat of summer. I'm in Scottsdale. I'm still in the heat of summer. What about all the swimming, all the sun we're doing, but particularly this swimming? So in mostly chlorinated pools, which is, I'd love to swim in salt water, but they're not readily accessible. What do you say to combat the drying effects of being in chlorine? Is there a way to prep your skin before? Is there anything special you should be doing after?
One thing that you find is after exposing your skin to chemicals like that, you can get this dryness. One thing that you can do is you can exfoliate your skin. When you're looking at the whole body, one thing that's a really nice thing to try, and if you haven't tried it, if any of your listeners haven't tried it, I would encourage you to do it, is to get a body brush with organic bristles, ideally one with a fairly long handle. And dry brushing your skin before you get into the shower is a really nice way to exfoliate the skin of your whole body. By exfoliating your skin, you're going to get the skin turning over more quickly, and that can get your skin actually healthier. As we get older, when we're younger, our skin turns over every 6 to 8 weeks. And this is one reason why our skin is smoother, it's tighter, it has more radiance to it. As we get older, that turnover process really slows down, and it allows the dead skin cells to build up on the surface. You combine that with the chlorine and with all the sunblock and the creams that you're not completely washing off, and you really get this buildup on the surface. So dry brushing is a great way to get rid of a lot of that dead skin. And when you dry brush, what you want to do before you get in the shower, you brush it from the outside in, so towards your heart, basically. So fingers towards your shoulders, feet towards your groin area. And that's a really nice way to help to rejuvenate the skin, and very simple, easy, and inexpensive.
Yeah, awesome. Great tip. Okay, love that. So here's my next question. This is like a landmine. When you start to consider, you go down this path of thinking, what about injectables? So what about Botox? But when you start talking to somebody about Botox who's in the know, there are now, it seems, at least half a dozen other ones that come out. How do you navigate that? And maybe let's start with Botox. Is it safe? Are there negative side effects? And then anything else that we should be considering, or maybe it's different around eyes and around mouth, for instance.
Yeah, so Botox is the most popular cosmetic treatment in the history of the world, believe it or not. And every year, upwards of 5 million people in the United States undergo injections of Botox. Now, it is also one of the most powerful toxins in the world, and maybe even in the universe that we know of. So this is a protein that's made by a bacteria that weakens muscles. And if you're exposed to it in a small to moderate amount, you can die from it. Well, Botox is minuscule amounts that we inject into muscles of the face and sometimes in other parts of the body that if injected in these minuscule tiny amounts, very controlled fashion, you can cause those muscles to weaken. and that can cause certain wrinkles that are caused by those muscles to soften up and to relax. So it's used in spastic muscle disorders. So people who have issues with, let's say, an esophagus that's spastic because your esophagus is muscle, then it can be injected therapeutically for that. You can inject it to reduce sweating in the armpits, but once again, most commonly used for wrinkles of the face that are caused by muscles. And those are typically the wrinkles of the upper face. So the forehead wrinkles, the wrinkles between your eyebrows that we call the 11 sign, and the crow's feet are the most commonly injected areas. Now, I know of a lot of holistic healthcare practitioners who have Botox. They don't necessarily admit it to their followers, but I can tell when they have it. But I'll tell you, too, that there are some people who have not had the best reaction to it. And they go online and they've told their stories, and the stories are concerning. That being said, honestly, Deborah, we treat at least 10 people with Botox in my office every single day. And after 15 years of that, every single day, I have not ever seen a patient with a significant complication from it, ever. It's not saying that it can't happen, but it's a very, very rare issue. Now, you can get a droopy eyelid if it's injected inappropriately, but that's temporary and it goes away.
Okay, I've got a question. So back to some of the other reasons like spastic muscles. So when Botox and migraines are put in the same sentence, I've always wondered about this. So I feel very comfortable asking you about this. And I actually have had some significant headaches. I don't know if we qualify it as migraines. I don't know when a migraine is a migraine, but I have had people who give me a massage tell me the occipital muscles are always tight around my neck. So would that suggest to you that I'd be a candidate for Botox? And is that how it's used in regard to migraines?
So your answer is kind of. So a true migraine is not necessarily mediated by muscles. Okay, so if you're tense, that doesn't necessarily cause a migraine. Right now, the latest thinking is that migraines may be due to dilation of certain veins around the brain. And so what can Botox do for that? Well, interestingly enough, if you have Botox injected into certain muscles all around the head, like the occipital, muscles in the occipital area and the temporal area and things like that, then studies do show it appears to reduce the incidence of migraines. How that works, it's hard to say. I don't know that we really, really know. Now, that's different than getting a tension headache. So if you say, geez, I'm always tense, and when I'm real stressed, I get this tension, in the back of my head, and I feel like I get kind of this tension headache from that. Well, then if Botox is injected into that muscle, it may relax that muscle, and that might help prevent that. But that's not necessarily the same as a true migraine. A true migraine often is a combination of a horrible headache, but it is usually preceded by auras where your vision changes and you get little floaters in your vision and stuff. It also often is accompanied by needing to be in a dark room, as well as nausea. So that's very different than a tension headache. So the answer is yes. Studies do show Botox can definitely help with migraines, but it doesn't sound that that's necessarily what your issue is. And if you do have true migraines, then a plastic surgeon is not the one you want to inject the Botox. You really want to see a neurologist. And the benefit of that is quite often insurance will help pay for that.
Nice. Great answer. And thanks for all of my girlfriends out there who are experiencing a little bit more headache and or migraines. That was a great distinction to make. Okay. But right now, I'm going to ask you a huge favor. I need you to be a girl's best friend and help us navigate what other fillers do we need to know about.
So I think that the big thing you want to keep in mind is there's a difference between Botox and fillers. So the upper face, if it's forehead, if it's frown lines between the brows, or if it's crow's feet, then really Botox is what you want to consider, because those are all typically dynamic wrinkles. Fillers are used to fill in static wrinkles or to plump up areas. And so traditionally, the first filler ever really used was collagen, and that was used quite often to plump up the lips. So you can use it to plump up the lips. We're using it quite often now to plump up the cheeks, and even to inject along the jawline, which can help to to kind of fill out and even lift a bit of the jawline. Fillers are most commonly, though, used in the nasolabial folds, and those are the deep wrinkles that go from the corners of the nose to the corners of the mouth. So fillers are very different than Botox, and the way I describe fillers is that they're basically like liquid skin. You buy it per the syringe, and usually it's 1 cc, 1 milliliter, and you use it to basically fill in these lines or plump up those parts of the face. The good thing about fillers is that they last much longer than Botox. Botox is usually about 3 to 4 months. Fillers, you can get anywhere from 6 months up to 2 years out of them. Now, the important thing with fillers, though, that's different than Botox, I told you, I've never seen a real major complication for Botox, but you can, if fillers are injected inappropriately, you can go get scarring from fillers. You can lose parts of your nose and your lip from fillers that are properly injected, and people have even gone blind from improperly injected fillers. So a couple of big time, a big deal. A couple of big time safety things you have to consider if you're having fillers. Number one, make sure your doctor uses a hyaluronic acid filler. Restylane and Juvederm are the two big brands, okay? Not all fillers are hyaluronic acid. Some of them are not. The benefit of a hyaluronic acid filler is that it is reversible. There's something that we can inject into it to melt it away in case you have a complication. Number two, make sure if you're having a filler done that the doctor ideally will use a cannula. So you can inject fillers with a needle or with a cannula. A needle is sharp, and if you accidentally inject that needle into a blood vessel, filler can clog a blood vessel, and that's when people can get scarring, tissue loss, and go blind. Cannulas are blunt, and they're made to go around blood vessels. It doesn't always work that way, but usually it does. Much lower risk of getting those types of complications with a cannula. So those are two big things. You're thinking filler, go with a hyaluronic acid, Restylane or Juvederm, and definitely, if possible, use a cannula.
Great tips. Okay. Thanks so much for that. All right. But I've got to ask this for the girlfriends out there who I know are thinking, what about this? What about this? Because I get to ask this all the time, ironically. How can I tone my neck up? I've got this loose skin. Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. I wish that there was a good option. There's a couple of things. So obviously a facelift is, if you really have a lot of droopiness and there's just truly sagging skin, then a facelift is the only real option. But short of that, if you've got banding, so if you've got those types of muscle bands where you smile and you frown and you grimace and you got these bands, sometimes Botox injections can help to smooth those out. So that's something that can help. If you've got some kind of early drooping, if you're, in your 50s and 40s, drooping isn't that bad, then by injecting filler along the jawline, we can get some mild lifting of that area. It works best in somebody who's got more of a thinner face. If you've got more of a rounder, fuller face, it doesn't work as well. That's another option. And then finally, there is a treatment called ultherapy. It is an ultrasound-based treatment that heats up the deep skin to help to tighten that skin up. Results are so-so. Some people get a nice result. Some people don't see a whole lot from it. But right now, as far as non-invasive skin tightening, that's probably the best thing out there. But as you can tell by the way I'm describing this, there's no magic bullet there, and it really comes down to the severity of it. And honestly, I do a facelift every week in my practice because that's one of those operations that no matter what you eat, no matter what, how great you take care of your skin, when that skin is drooping, there just isn't a great other option.
Great answer. And I think a truthful one. So let me ask you this, and then I want to ask you a little bit about your new book, because I'm guessing that maybe some of those stories, you've got some good stories in there. After a facelift, talk to me about, I don't know how much you see patients afterward.
Oh, all the time.
But what's the change in them or for them as far as confidence, self-esteem? I mean, what does it do for them?
The simplest way to do it is I get so many people that come into my office and I say, well, what's bothering you? And they take their fingers, they hold them out to the sides of their face, and they lift up. They lift their neck and their lower face, and they go, this is what I want. Another way to look at it is if you say, well, I don't like when I look in the mirror, but when I lay on my bed and I hold the mirror over my face, I like how that looks. that's what you're looking at with a facelift. So the term facelift is a bit of a confusing one because some people think a facelift has to do with the eyebrows or the cheeks. It really has to do with the lower face and the neck. And so really what it is if you've got jowls, if you've got loose hanging skin, then it basically lifts and gets rid of all of that. But
I want to circle back.
But it's at the expense of permanent scars around your ears, which can be visible. It's about a 3.5 hour operation with about a 1 to 2 week recovery time. Now, I have been using some PRP with it lately, which has been really nice as a way to reduce swelling and bruising, but it's still big surgery. I keep my patients overnight to get monitored. There is a risk of bleeding. I'll tell you, one of the scariest things that I have seen, and this is part of my book, actually, Playing God. And this is one of the reasons why I have gone into the holistic direction that I have, is I had a patient who came in very kind of typical patient. She was in her, I think she was in her early 60s at the time, a real attractive woman. And she said, you know what, all my friends have gotten all this stuff done, and I get together with them, and I feel like I look old. I feel like everybody else is looking at them. They're all the same age as me, but the guys all look at them, and I just don't feel like I have kept up with them. So I looked at her and we did an exam, and she was very healthy. And it's like, and she was a perfect candidate for a facelift. So I brought her to surgery. The surgery took about 3 hours, very straightforward, and everything went great. I saw her before I left the hospital, and I'm driving back to my office, and I'm about 10 minutes out, having left, and I get a page on my pager, and it's from the nurse taking care of her, and it's a 911 page, which means that bad stuff is happening. So I call her and I say, well, what's going on? She said her neck's filling up with blood. And so I whip my car around and I hit the gas pedal and I book it back towards the hospital. Of course, there's traffic, and I'm weaving in and out of traffic. At that point, I'm hoping that a cop will try to stop me, because then maybe that cop will move all the traffic out of my way so I can get back to the hospital. So I get back to the hospital, I'm running up the stairs, and I enter her room, and I don't see my patient in front of me. I see somebody who literally looks like Jabba the Hutt. Her neck is so filled up with blood that you can't really see where her face ends and her neck begins. So the worry that we have with a facelift is that even a little bit of bleeding like that can get out of control very quickly. And so the fear is that the bleeding can literally cause the patient to suffocate because of the pressure on the neck, and basically they can't breathe. So at the bedside, I threw gloves on and literally took a pair of scissors and cut all of her stitches out and stuck my hand under her skin, and I'm pulling out handfuls of blood out of her neck. Now you're like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do that now. So, literally it was minutes that I had before bad stuff was going to happen. And Deborah, I rush her to surgery. I find this little artery that's bleeding, and we stop that. I clean everything up. I re-lift her neck and close everything up. And she ended up doing really, really well in the end. But it really reminded me at that time, and this happened when my practice was really starting to take off, and it's got me into thinking like, I really have to take this so seriously, because bad stuff can happen at any time. And it really is a true measure of a doctor is really that whole Hippocratic oath of do no harm. And that was really, a lot of that was the beginning of this foray into being a holistic plastic surgeon and using surgery as a last resort. And that's what we're doing now. So now that you've been scared away from having a facelift, it's a very uncommon complication. But at the same time, you got to know about this stuff, because bad stuff can happen. And and there's so many stories you hear in the media about horrible doctors who don't take care of their patients. You just have to do your homework.
Oh my God. Okay. Now I'm questioning, do I want to hear more stories? Okay. But I think so. It's hard to resist for sure, but you've worked in hospitals, ICUs, the operating room for 2 decades. I'm sure you've got some more of these secrets that most people don't know. What else you got, doctor?
Yeah, one of the things that's kind of interesting, and the book that I have, Playing God, it's about how you go from being a new doctor to really a modern surgeon. Because it's different than it used to be, where it was like, doctor, whatever the doctor says, that's what you do. Now we still have that mentality, that kind of arrogant doctor, playing God type of doctor mentality, but that is in general being phased out, which I think is a really good thing. But it isn't, and part of it is important. And one reason I wrote the book was so that people can realize just this journey that their doctors go through. So, for example, I went through a general surgery residency where I took 3 years. Where I was working in the hospitals, and the first year you're an intern, where you basically just do busy work and paperwork and stuff like that. And the second year is when you really start taking over the hospital. And this was a story from my book, but my first night on call as a second year resident in the hospital, I was basically in charge of what we call putting out fires. So you're in charge of the whole hospital, all the surgery patients, and anything bad goes on, you're supposed to help take care of it. So I'm walking down the hall. This is my first night, and this nurse runs out in the hall and says, call a code. And she says, are you a resident? I look around, look to my left, look to my right. I'm like, I think she's talking to me. I'm like, yes. And she goes, come in here and run this code. Now, a code is basically when somebody is doing very poorly and is about to die. So I come into the room, and I hadn't reviewed my life-saving stuff because it hadn't crossed my mind that I should do that, because I was always the number 2 guy, and there was always the number 1 person who was supposed to take care of this stuff. So I looked down at this woman, and she had stopped breathing, and the nurse looks up at me and said, what do we do? And I had my own intern who basically had moved from Pakistan, had barely spoke English, and we're just like blank, like literally my mind was a blank. And he says, electric shock. So I think, oh my gosh, so we hook her up to this monitor, and she's in ventricular fibrillation, which is basically the rhythm that your heart takes before you die. And the solution is you need to basically do the electric shock. You need to defibrillate the patient. So the nurse gets everything all taken care of, and I'm the leader there, and I literally am freaking out inside because I hadn't done any of my review. And, new doctor, even though I have an MD, I didn't know how to save somebody. So here I'd watch TV and everything. So I grabbed the paddles, and I put the paddles on the patient's chest, and I yell, clear, as if I'm Dr. McDreamy from Grey's Anatomy. The nurse yells, stop. She grabs my hands, moves them into a different position on the patient's body, and she goes, okay, now go ahead. I go, clear. I press the buttons. The patient gets the defibrillation, the electric shock, and we stare at the monitor for a few seconds, and her normal rhythm comes up, like I actually saved her. But had I done it the way I initially had, I probably wouldn't have shocked her heart. I probably would have shocked her liver instead. So this was one of the first days in residency where it really, really hit me hard of like, Tony, you really have to take this very seriously, because these patients' lives are in your hands. And if it wasn't for this nurse, and I think that in medicine, the nurses don't nearly get enough credit where credit is due, because they save physicians, doctors like me, especially young doctors, in July from a lot of different potential mistakes that we might make. And I think we really rely on them more than a lot of people realize. And so one of the secrets really is that July is the month where new residents enter all of the hospitals. And that's not necessarily, if you're in a university setting, that not necessarily the best month to be in the hospital, because you may be treated by somebody like that.
Oh my gosh, what a story. Thanks for sharing that.
And luckily, the patient did fine, so it's one of those where, thank God, the patient did fine. And after doing that, what did I do? I went straight back to the call room, and I reviewed all my life-saving stuff, and never had an issue after that.
Hilarious. Okay, so listeners, just so you know, the new book, Playing God, The Evolution of a Modern Surgeon. It's a humorous, if you cannot tell, heartwarming, and sometimes harrowing, which we may have heard here, account of surgery, residency, fellowship, and starting a private practice. Okay, so to wrap up, I'm not going to ask you if there's something I should have asked you. I'm going to ask you, is there one more story that you can share that just is like burning that you've got to get it out?
Yeah, I've got one that I think really, the title of the book is Playing God. And I think, there's this whole idea as surgeons that we play God, that we're holier than thou, mightier than thou. And in the end, honestly, what it comes down to as a more of a modern surgeon is it's not that, it's the opposite. Like I need God to help me. And I firmly believe that I'm an instrument of God. So I had this patient who came to see me, and she was in her 50s, I think maybe 50s, early 60s. She came into my office with a cane, and she looked very, very uncomfortable. And she said, Dr. Youn, I've seen 15 other plastic surgeons, and every single one has turned me down. She said, and she had tears in her eyes. She said, you're my last hope. Please help me. So I sat down. I said, well, what's going on? And she said, I ended up, I lost some weight, and I had a tummy tuck done by another doctor, and everything fell apart. Basically what happened is that all of her skin of her tummy, the majority of it died. And she had these horrible infections, flesh-eating bacteria. Now, this woman, if you look at her, so she had all this, infections and everything scarred in and was just really painful to the point where she could barely walk. And she was in constant pain. But if you look at her medical history, she was really, what we call a frequent flyer in the hospital because she had so many medical issues. She was diabetic. She had multiple heart attacks, had stents placed, was on blood thinners. She had depression. She had multiple other multiple more other medical issues that anybody would look at her and say, are you a candidate for cosmetic surgery? And the answer is no. So I'm looking at this, and inside my mind is saying, don't operate on her. Like she's going to die on the operating room table. And she's telling me her story that, she said, look, I lost this weight and this happened to me. And she goes, all I want to do is hold my granddaughter and play with her again. That's all I ask. And she goes, I just can't. She goes, my husband won't even look at me. I'm depressed and I feel deformed. So I took a look at her, and it really was a big mess. I mean, she had skin grafts and scar tissue, and everything was just socked in and painful. And every part of me said, don't operate on her. This is a horrible complication waiting to happen. And when it does happen, Tony, it's on you. You're the doctor. You're the one that operated on her. You need to take care of it, and it's your responsibility. But I felt this, and I've had this happen multiple times in my career, but I felt this peace inside that I was meant to help her, and that everything was going to be okay. So even, against all of my better knowledge, I end up bringing her to surgery. I perform an operation. It took 3 hours. Everything went very, very smoothly. And she did really well right after surgery. She came back to see me about 6 weeks later. And her insurance, which we tried to bill for the surgery, rejected her claim. So she came in with a carrot cake, and she said, I know that my insurance rejected this. I don't have any money to pay you, but I'm going to give you this as payment. And I said, that's fine. That's all I need. And she said, Dr. Youn, I'll tell you something that I never would have thought would have happened. And she said, last night I played with my granddaughter for the first time in over a year. And I just really want to thank you for taking the chance. And she said, why did you take this chance on me when all the other doctors wouldn't do it? And I told her basically that I just felt that there was this peace, that this was the thing to do. And it was God telling me that I need to take care of this. And I had no doubt in the end that it was going to turn out that way. So that's kind of a lot of what the book is about is this kind of the new surgeon and the new doctor. And it's not about you being God, but it's so much more and deeper, I think, than medicine sometimes has been portrayed in the past.
What a great story. I love that. And I think you answered back to, maybe my earlier question about the end result and the change in somebody, the change in their life and the impact that it might have when you do your magic. So cool. So
Thank
cool.
you. Yeah, it's definitely, plastic surgery is a lot more than what you see on Botched. That's for sure.
and by example in the Kardashians. So true.
Exactly.
Dr. Youn, thanks so much for being here. One more time, I just want to mention the title of the book is, I'm going to let you say it.
Playing God, the Evolution of a Modern Surgeon. It's available in bookstores, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all across the country.
So good. And I will, for listeners, I will link to it in the show notes. And listeners, I am dying to know if I missed a question. I tried to hit everything for you, girlfriend. But if I did miss one, leave it below the show link at flipping50.com/playing God. There's a dash between playing and God. I love hearing from you, and I will pass anything along that I need to Dr. Youn. If this episode was helpful, please leave a rating in iTunes and then share it with a friend. Surround yourself with a community of supportive women just like you. To get the most from this week's episode, again, come back, check out today's show notes. I've got how to get in touch with Dr. Youn, where to find him and follow him, and details about the book and the title. So what are you waiting for? Let's start Flipping 50 together.